All right, we are going to kick this event off. Hi, everybody. My name is Ella. I am a student marketing partner here at the Hub. I'm also a business student, and I'm so happy you guys took some time out of your day to be here. So just a couple things before we get started. We're actually going to have a poll for you guys. So, let's see, 1 second. So if you've ever used Menti before, you can scan the QR code, or you can go to menti.com, put this code in. We just want to get a sense of where people are at with the topic today, where you guys are at in your professional journeys. So once you've scanned, just like give me a thumbs up. So I can just switch. Perfect. So our first question is, where are you in your professional journey? So you can rank it from student, early career, mid-career. Pretty even spread across the board. Lots of mid-careers. All right. Good to know. Our second question is, how much do you know about today's topic? Not much, some, or a lot? Okay, like 50-50. Some people are like kind of sure, kind of not sure, ready to learn more. Awesome. Next question is, what do you want to do with today's information? Do you want to be inspired? Do you want to learn it? Fine. So, lots of repliers. That's great. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for taking time to do that. That is super helpful for us. So before I invite our speaker, I would like to first invite Graham Henshaw. He is the Assistant Provost for Entrepreneurship. Introduce our speaker.
Woo! Thank you for doing that poll, by the way. That really helps our guests to know who's here and kind of how you want to engage with the content. So I get to invite Erik Berg up in just a minute. Known Erik for some time now, actually. It's wild to think about how long ago you were here. I noticed the trend as I was preparing the intro remarks. I think every alum that we've had as a guest speaker has been a double major alum. And so Erik is no exception there. So another double major, finance and public policy. But Erik had a concentration in entrepreneurship. So shout out for entrepreneurship. And he's had an interesting career journey so far. He's worked at the intersection of startups, venture capital, and now he's in a big corporation, Capital One, doing product work. And so he's going to talk from all of those perspectives in today's talk. Right now, he's a senior product manager at Capital One, and his team builds products for small business customers. He's also a founder. That feels like that can't get far from your journey. You're always working on something. The Building Better project, and that is a focus on helping people create things that actually matter, which I think segues really neatly into today's topic. So this is about building the right thing, which unfortunately it's very easy to build the wrong thing. And so if we listen carefully, I think we're going to figure out how we can listen to customers and avoid building things that nobody actually wants. So keep your ears open for that. Outside of work, Erik is spending time with his family, and I'm bummed that I missed them. They were just here a second ago. He reads a lot. I think those are just books back there. I don't want to give away anything. He's got a pretty big book collection and a bourbon collection, I understand. Both of which are kind of like spiraling out of control. So please join me in welcoming Erik Berg. Thanks, Graham. Hey, everyone. I'm excited to be back here today talking with y'all about one of my favorite topics, customer discovery. So we're going to talk about what that is, and then I'm going to hopefully give you both the lens from the kind of my experience in startups, starting my own ventures, investing, kind of the more entrepreneurial side of what discovery looks like, but also talk about my day job, which is doing discovery at a large tech environment. So Graham kind of walked through my background already. And I also am a William & Mary entrepreneurship alum. Some fun William & Mary facts from me. This was my wife and I homecoming 2015. And then this was a couple months ago when we welcomed our second boy. And I even was wearing my William Mary hat in the recovery room. So I thought that was a fun picture. Okay, so what is discovery? I'll tell you what I think it is. There's actually different people have different opinions. But before we jump into that, just a couple of quick questions to lay the groundwork. Why do products fail? Does anyone have a idea of why products fail? Startup, big company products.
A the person developing a product doesn't do the research, doesn't understand what the customer wants.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
So I was thinking that maybe because there's no differentiation with the products that already exist in the market.
That's definitely a part of it. Fundamentally, you're both kind of right. Fundamentally, both startups and large companies, products or features fail because there's not market demand. People build things and then try to sell them, and no one wants the thing that they just spent a lot of time running and building. And so the next question is, well, why do we launch products and spend so much money, time? If you're working on a venture, you know how much time goes into it. If have worked at a big company, you know the hundreds and thousands of man hours that go into launching even small features. So why do we launch things the market doesn't want?
I think people assume that like once you launch it, people will look at it and they want it. So that's like a false assumption.
Yeah, totally. I think it goes back to your first answer as well. I would say for the purpose of my talk, the reason we launch products that the market doesn't want is it is a failure to perform proper customer discovery. And again, this I believe is relevant for the smallest startup as well as the largest corporation. So what is customer discovery? I've used that terminology a few times. I define it as the continuous process of learning what is true about your customers in order to build for their needs. And as we go through, you'll see why I highlighted some of these call outs and bullets. But a couple of the principles I think about in discovery is truth over assumptions, really grounding yourself in what's true, prioritizing evidence over your intuition, testing and iterating over completing unending analysis. This will be the first time you hear me say it today, but not the last, talking to real customers over just about everything else. Also, a few things already have thrown the men, so that's just how excited I am about the topic. A few things that customer discovery is not, and people, both again startups and big companies, often fall into some of these traps. But customer discovery is not trying to convince people that your idea is good. It's not about gathering compliments or trying to justify and fix yourself. It's also kind of the opposite end of the spectrum at larger companies. Customer discovery is not backing into a decision you already made or just copying competitors and what they're doing. And so I'm going to talk about some principles behind customer discovery and how you can do it. I saw a lot of y'all's focus was on practical applications. That's perfect. We have 8 steps, 8-step plan for customer discovery. So we'll get into that. But before I jump into that, why does discovery matter? So a couple of things. First, through an economic lens. A failure to do discovery, we said, leads you to launching products that the market doesn't actually want. So from an economic perspective, discovery saves you time and money. Critically important at large companies, but also critically important at a startup when you are the resource. Your time and blood and sweat and tears is the resource. And it also helps you prioritize between competing priorities. This is a big thing in my job. We have a list of 100 ideas that we could improve our products with. And how do we choose which one of those to invest time and money into? Discovery is a big part of that. And also an ethical frame. This is something that I'm really passionate about. As Graham mentioned, I am the founder of the Building Better project, where I write about ethical building, I build ethical products, and I also help businesses apply some of those principles. So you'll hear this lens from me a few times throughout because I think it's critical. I also think a lot of the conversation around tech, startups, product management misses this piece. I think it's sort of detrimental. But discovery matters because it humanizes your customers. I think a lot of the biggest mistakes in building processes at startups to the largest corporations because we think of our customers as a data point, as an MAU, instead of an actual human being that's using the product. And then it also keeps your building grounded in true needs. So the reason discovery matters is because when you don't do it well, at best, you're going to ship a product no one wants. At best, you're going to waste a lot of time and energy and effort. And actually, I think an even worse outcome, at least on a societal level, is you ship a product that actually makes your users worse off. Maybe people actually use it, but not in the way that you intend, or it has a negative impact on them. And I think proper discovery will help us guard against building these things. I am going to take just a couple minutes to talk about what I call the builder mindset. And I think this is really important. Probably this is one of the big things. If you can only take one or two things away from this talk, I would encourage you to spend some time thinking about this. But this is something I'm really passionate about. The builder mindset. Like I said, this is something that I write about a lot. And I think of the builder mindset. And the reason I say builder instead of entrepreneur or technologist or product manager is because I think it's broadly applicable to so many different areas of life. And that we all, if you think about it, are building different kinds of things. And really, the way I think about it is taking ownership of what you're building, your product, and building to promote your users' flourishing. And so really thinking about building with the end user in mind and trying to make that better off. And if you keep this mindset as a focal point and as a frame, you'll find that you will make the right decisions in discovery. I believe that will not only lead to better products for your users, but positive outcomes for your venture as well. A little compare and contrast. So builder first versus solution first. I think you can also call this problem orientation, customer first, opportunity first, or solution first. And so really, when you're thinking with this builder mindset, you start with a human being, you listen to their needs and build in a way that addresses those needs, and then you iterate and you keep going until it works. All too often, this sounds kind of obvious, but in my experience as an investor, as a startup operator, working in tech, probably 95% of the things we build are in this red column. We start with a solution, we figure out how to monetize it, and we just scrap what fits. It would blow your mind the amount of features and investment that goes into functionality at large tech companies that gets shipped. No one uses it, and within 6 months, it's just scrapped, and potentially years of research development are just totally thrown in the dumpster. And it's because we don't have a proper posture towards our build. Okay, that's enough preaching. Let's actually talk about the practical aspects. And so I'm going to walk through what I call a discovery loop. This is, you may have seen other similar things. A lot of best practices around building have this kind of pattern. I think there's some unique things in here that make it a little different from others that we've seen. But breaking it down, there's kind of 4 parts of the discovery process. So there's learning, where you're observing that need and you're grounding yourself in the context of it. There's testing those observations, building hypotheses and testing it. There's building, which is resolving kind of the hypothesis or what the outcome of your test leads you to believe, and seeing the results, and then iterating. So evaluating what's the outcome of your building, and do you need to make changes, and then going from there.
I'm going to walk through each step of this process, and have it break this down into like practical step-by-step guide that y'all can use. So one, start with a narrow customer opportunity space. So again, starting from the customer perspective, narrow tends to be better. It's not like a foolproof rule, but in general, the narrower you can be, the more specific you can get into the problem opportunity space, and the better understanding you can build of your customer, and the better you can build for their needs. So recommendation there is it's better to start narrow. You can always expand once you've built momentum. It's a lot harder to come to market with a broad offering that no one really wants, as opposed to a really narrow focus that really meets an acute need, and then expanding from there. And then talking to humans. This is the second time I'm bringing it up, but there is a tendency to, I think, in startups, when you're starting something, when you're a student, there's the same tendency at big tech companies, is to rely on survey research and data. We have so much data at our fingertips. Maybe 20 years ago, access to data was a limiting factor, and getting that access really was an unlock for your ability to make better decisions. Now I'd say we have way too much data, not too much, but getting access to data is not the issue. It's sorting through it, sifting through it, and not allowing it to bias you or over relying on it. I think this is especially true in an AI world, and only going to become more and more true, that it becomes so easy to rely on data. And there's a bunch of like psychological reasons why that is, but I would contend that there is no substitute to actually talking to a human being. At Capital One, we have amazing data teams. We have amazing customer research teams. I have people I work with that can create the super detailed market research or insights about customer groups for me. And yet, every single time I talk with a customer, I come away with an insight that I haven't had before. And no matter how many customers I talk to, that's what remains the case. And so, encouraging here to I'm not saying throw out data. Data is really important. Just don't overly rely on it, and make sure that you are trimmed down to actual customer conversations. Yeah,
So you're saying obviously that part is self-explanatory, but step one, start with a narrow customer opportunity space. You have like a specific business in mind. Do you recommend talking to people at that business as far as the customers go, or is it like better to talk to people in general? Like the example you have there, tell me about the last time you had to say like work on something.
yeah.
Do you want to talk to the general public to get that insight, or do you want to talk to your potential customer there to get that insight for that question?
Yeah, so that would be good question. Like within the bounds of the customer group you're focused on. So start with the customer group, whatever it is, lawn care companies. Start talking to lawn care companies, and then that example is the kind of have an appendix with some resources, including some guides on like asking good interviewing questions. But you really want to make sure you're not biasing the answers. And a lot of people, there's a ton of bias that comes into play in interviewing and like the science of interviewing. And people really struggle to answer general questions or about things. If you ask someone like, hey, what's the hardest part about your job? They'll be like, I don't know. But if you ask them, hey, tell me about the last time you stayed to work on something will immediately come to mind. And the likelihood is that is one of the harder parts of their job. So asking questions like that actually helps you get a lot richer insights than if you just had kind of generic questions. So that's kind of where I get my point of like learning to ask good questions in interviews is really important. You can't just talk to you can talk to someone. There is non-zero value in just having a conversation, but learning how to ask the right questions will.
I was just curious, in the case of Capital One product side, are you doing a lot of like focus groups or is it more one-on-one interviews? Is it outsourced or taken care of internally?
All of the above.
Yeah.
So we have whole team, customer research teams that do run research studies. They may do focus groups. They may recruit people. Me and my team, we have weekly customer interview Zoom interviews that we set up. So every Friday we work with our research team and they have a small business owner that we talk to. Sometimes we'll source those ourselves. But we also can have a team that will help us source those. So it's the whole spectrum. We have a market insights team that does more like market level research report. So we're kind of spoiled for choice, but I don't think there's any substitute for actually talking to a small business owner and hearing about what they're going through. Okay, still within learn, but look for opportunities. I want to kind of double click into this one a bit because I think it's really important. But as you start having these conversations, you probably have some ideas going in, but really trying to take a step back and not overly anchor to the ideas you have. Because what you're going to find as you start having 5, 10 of these conversations, you're going to start picking up on themes. You're going to start seeing connections that you weren't seeing before, pain points that you keep hearing about. One of my favorite things to look out for is packed together solutions. Anytime someone's solving something in a spreadsheet, that is like alarm bell of like, this is something that they could use some help with potentially. And then again, turning back to that builder mindset of as you are interviewing people, if you could build one thing that would help them in their lives and their jobs and what they're trying to accomplish, what would it be? I have some recommendations on prioritizing or generating ideas as well as prioritizing things. Look very different if you're at a big company or working on a side project or a startup. These are for my own side project ideas. I have a spreadsheet and I rank my ideas on this matrix. And then there's a bunch of common frameworks that.
Hey, Eric, there's a question from Zoom. They want to just know, it's probably related to your last slide about the funnel and customer discovery a bit more, but they're asking specifically about open-ended questions on surveys and using that as a mechanism to then prompt an in-person or phone call to clarify.
Yeah, that can be really good. I think it's a balance. You don't want to have, I think it's a good idea when you do surveys to provide some surface area for follow-up. I don't think you want to have that be the entire purpose of the survey, but it's a good idea. I try whenever I'm interviewing people to capture an email or something that I can go back to and follow up. Because that the second conversation can often get to deeper, more interesting specific places than the first. So I think it's good.
Appreciate it.
So Eric, I don't know if you can hear me, but this is Steve. I was going to ask a question. And I did look at a survey about multiple choice. So they literally had blank paragraphs. So that's please can answer the questions. And then I also asked permission to call them or to meet with them to clarify if there's something that I didn't understand what they're saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think the one thing you have to balance with surveys is response rates. And so you want to ask enough to get meaningful insights without asking too much. So I think that's the one thing with open-ended questions is they tend to make the surveys longer and a higher burden to fill out. But I think they're definitely an important tool in the toolkit for surveying.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Sure, those acronyms were the Rice, Moscow, something.
Yes, Rice is. I forget the exact acronym. They're basically all ways to balance value versus effort. So CBT, we use on my teams, that's customer value, business value, tech effort. So we're basically like prioritizing or ranking things based on customer value, business value, and then how much effort it would be. Moscow is a kind of, I forget the exact acronym, but it's MSCW, and it's basically a now, next, later of like what's the things we need to build now, what are kind of nice to have, and what can we get to eventually. And RICE I would say CBT is a subset of RICE, where it's similarly value versus effort. There's a ton of these. My recommendation was like the exact framework you use for prioritization probably doesn't matter as much as that you're like using a systematic way to prioritize things. There are pros and cons.
That's like when you decide that you have like burned it out to pass onto the test phase without like falling into like an over analysis or like wanting to like the need to achieve so much in the learning phase, like how you know.
Yes, that is an excellent question. And it's a great segue to this because I think you need to move on. The whole point of thinking of this as a loop and as an ongoing process is that it's not like there is ever going to be a discrete gate where you walk through it and it says, okay, I've learned enough about my customers that I can now go and test these solutions. Really, this should be something you're always doing. And in good product teams and good startups, I think all of these are happening simultaneously and continuously. So I would say you want to move on to testing as quickly as possible, but that doesn't mean you stop learning. Like you should continue to go through this loop as much as possible. But I know I in grad school I had an entrepreneurship professor who told me that the biggest enemies of student entrepreneurship are one, underconfidence, and two, overanalysis. And so, especially with that second point about overanalysis, I do the same thing. I want to like spend months doing market research because it's kind of scary to put yourself out there and start testing it. But you almost always want to start testing and move forward in this loop before you're comfortable with it, especially at first, because most people's natural proclivity will be to default to overanalysis. So if you think you might be ready to test something, you should test it. So you get it from. And with that said, identifying assumptions, this is a kind of a formal way of thinking through, okay, you've learned some things, you have some insights, what should you test first? And this can be a helpful way. What assumptions are you making? What needs to be true for an idea to work? Which assumption is riskiest? Is there a assumption that if it's not true, nothing else matters? That's the whole ballgame. That may be a good one to test first. And then the testing the riskiest assumption. You'll see there's kind of an ROI element to this, given the fact that your resources, either as a founder or at a company, are constrained. We want to be as efficient as possible. So what's the least amount of effort I can do or I can expend to de-risk some of these assumptions? This can take a lot of different, this can look completely different, but there's a bunch of strategies to test things in a really lightweight way so that you can spend minimum effort. You don't have to build a full product. With AI, it's easier to do lightweight prototyping and things like that. But what always be thinking about, what's the minimum effort I can expand to validate some of the assumptions. Once you have done some testing, build. So this is very similar, and this is kind of weird to say and seems counterintuitive, but you want to build the minimum necessary that you need to. What does this mean? This can mean you need to build a full product. For certain kinds of opportunities, you have to have a full product offering before you can go to market or sell it. So more often than not, you can validate or build something, build a prototype, build a landing page, building the least amount necessary. Again, thinking about the return on your resources. So at work, we talk about minimizing output, which is the actual work we ship, the code we ship, while maximizing outcomes. It's really easy to fall into the trap, especially at a large corporation, of just focusing on output, of like, hey, look at all the work we just did. But the amount of work you do doesn't matter if it doesn't create value. It's way better to do one small piece of work that creates a ton of value than a massive project that no one wants. And so these are some good principles to true back to of minimizing the effort that you expand while maximizing the value you're creating. Again, whether you're a startup or at a big company. And one quick note here, minimum viable product gets thrown around a lot in startup tech entrepreneurship parlance. There's nothing wrong with that. Minimum viable products are great. I'll talk to you about an MVP I built later. But when you're working at larger companies, you can't really, depending on who your customers are, go with like a like rubber band and paper clip solution. And so that's where you have to think through, do we need a minimum marketable product, something we can actually sell to our customers? We need to build something that's not going to like harm our brand. So just balancing like which approach is right, depending on the context. And I'll talk through how to do that. And then the last step is iterating. So observing the results, build measurement into whatever you're building, testing, what worked, what didn't, what surprised you. Again, this is a great place to ask the question of what is the effect of what we're building? Did it make our users better off? And then fix what is broke. So this can be either with the actual thing you're building. Hey, there's still some issue. We need to fix those. This can be with a process. Hey, we realize we're not really talking to the right customers. There's this niche that we haven't talked to yet. Also, I think something that's often forgotten about is legacy users. If you already have an existing product, how can we make sure that we're not ruining? We all have cell phone updates that we hate when they happen. Like, how can you ensure that you're not making the product worse for more legacy users or different user bases within those user groups? So those are the steps. I'm going to walk through a case study and then I'll wrap up pretty quickly for some questions. But this is a side project that I am currently working on. I got this idea because when my wife and I got married, we're pretty religious and we went through premarital counseling and had a wonderful experience and got a lot out of it. But my brother is not as religious as we are. And so when he got married, from us talking about it, he knew how valuable that experience was for us, but he didn't really know where to go for it. So my idea was kind of a modern premarital counseling. And so my hypothesis would a self-guided premarital course appeal to modern couples? And so what I did was I started talking to people who were engaged, friends and family, and about, what their process was as they were getting ready to be married, what they were going through, what they were thinking about, what they were nervous about. I also did some research about the market. And my big insight here was that a lot of the people I was talking to thought this kind of offering would be valuable, but they didn't really know where to go for it. There wasn't a natural place for them to. If there either was, had some kind of religious affiliation. They're like, oh, of course I'm going to go to my church to do premarital counseling, or they weren't, and they were like, I have no idea where I'm going to go. But formal marriage counseling before we're even married sounds a little scary and expensive. And so based on that, I decided to test it. So before I had built anything or written anything or put the course together, I started trying to sell the course. So I went to friends and family who were engaged, and I said, hey, I talked to you about premarital education. If I made a course on that with some best practices and research evidence-based activities, would you spend $100 on? And so I actually got them to pay me $100. I didn't do this for 1,000 people, but I had 5 friends and family pay me $100. And it wasn't the money. It didn't really matter. It was more about validating, oh, this is actually something someone would pay for. And it's really easy to have friends and family. My mother loves all of my ideas. But there's only so many that actually my mom would probably pay $100 for any of my ideas, but for other friends and family, this is a really good test. So that to me validated that, okay, there might be something here. So I built out the first version of the course. It was super ugly. It was a Notion page, still ugly. It's a Notion page. It's links to Google Docs. And I started sending it to people to get feedback on what they thought. Like I mentioned, this was definitely somewhere it was appropriate to minimum viable product. This didn't have to be perfect to still be valuable. And then I built feedback surveys into the course. I interviewed people who completed the course, and based on their feedback, further validated this was valuable, this was a good use of their time. But I got a ton of insights about the parts of the course that were helpful, parts that weren't. And so over at the beginning of the year, I rebuilt the course and built a version 2.0 of it, and now having more people go through the second iteration. And then based on the feedback I get there, my plan is to kind of productize it and make it a broadly sellable project. So that's a real life example of how I walked through this route with something I'm working on. Some common mistakes, I kind of mentioned these, but again, working backwards from solution, not talking to customers, gathering compliments instead of compliments instead of commitments, get people to put their money where their mouth is really helpful. At big companies, these two especially are really easy traps to fall into, overweighting the business value over the customer value of an investment. And then again, I mentioned maximizing output instead of outcomes. So big takeaways, if you can only take 3 things away from this: talk to your customers, face-to-face is best. Zoom is the next best thing. I will accept a phone call, but just make sure you're talking to your customers. Don't just use data points or market research in a silo. Don't just ask Claude or Gemini and rely on that for insight by your customer. You can ask those tools, but make sure it's complemented with talking to some real customers. Adopt a builder's mindset. I think this is super important and will set you up for success, whether you are building a startup or working at a big company. And I think our world would be better off if more people, especially in tech, adopted that mindset. And then the discovery loop. Again, it's a continuous process. You probably, once you get good at it, can be doing all these simultaneously, but it's a never-ending process that you just continue to do, and your product and your offering will get better. It'll continually meet your needs better to be able to expand into new products and offerings. And that is how discovery works. So before I jump into questions, if you're wondering where did Erik get all these ideas, these are probably the 4 most influential books. I've read a lot of books on tech and startups and product management, but these are the 4 most influential books of mine that really impressed me in the way I think and changed the way I think about building in general. And so for the first 4, I brought copies of all 4. So for the first 4 questions I get, you can come up and pick out one of these books to read. Timeless Way of Building is no longer in print, so it is a really stuffed up copy I got off eBay. So apologies for the notes in that, but still worth a read. So what questions can I answer for us?
This is great. Thank you so much. So, I was wondering if you have any strategies to get or to entice your customers to actually give you some of those insights, to take time out of their busy days, especially for my customers. They're educators, and so they are inundated and don't have time. I'm not currently in the public school classroom. So are there any creative ways that you've seen that have helped kind of move that needle a little bit and get more of the information that you need from the customers?
Yeah, that can be really tough. Honestly, sometimes like at work, we often default to like paying them or like giving them some gift cards or something just to make it worth their time. It often doesn't take much, but that is a useful tool if we're struggling to get traction. I think networking and getting warm intros, the likelihood of someone talking to you is a lot higher. And then coming with like some kind of value prop off the bat can be really helpful. Of like, hey, I have XYZ 10 tips for educators, and like a lot of kind of like sales tactics, but it's like, hey, here's some value. Would you be willing to have a quick chat with me? And then there's one more thing, like comments. Yeah, it's hard. I think, but like people like to complain about what frustrates them. So I think like if you can get them in a room, most people are usually really talk. Oh, while you're a student, you have a student email address, and people are way more willing to talk to you in general. So I would definitely leverage that.
Well, thank you for thinking I'm a student.
Whatever ins you have, or like groups you're part of vision.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, I have a question. So I guess I'm a student. I don't really have a picture. Like if I treat like the urge submission project like a product, what is like the underlying pain point that I'm trying to solve with myself? Like anxiety, like desire for recognition, or stuff.
So you're saying like thinking of your venture as a like working on your venture as a
Yeah, like
product?
thinking of like work or like project as kind of like a venture or a product.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I would yeah, that's kind of turning things in on itself a bit, but I like it. I think I would try to turn back to the why, just like you're trying to get to with your customers. Like, why is this for you to work on? What is motivating you? It's taken me 10 years post-graduation to get a better idea of what motivates me professionally. I wouldn't say I have it all figured out either. So it's an iterative process. The more you can front load some of that, thinking the better. So I definitely think you can apply some of this and think about, okay, what gets me excited? Why do I want to work on this? Why am I to do this? Money, free, because you enjoy it. I work on side projects outside my 9 to 5 when I have 2 kids because I love it. I love doing it, and that's when I'm happiest is when I'm writing and working and stuff. So yeah, took me a long time to figure that out. But, all right, so I'm gonna get some people who have questions.
How did you draft your feedback survey? Particularly for me, I'm thinking of it in the perspective of how can I gain further information to make them want to utilize this product again, or to spread the word to other individuals who would like to use this? So how did you craft that survey to get the results, not the results that you want, but get the answer that you need to take the next step?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of best practices around survey construction. I would say I wouldn't focus on virality in your survey per se. That's definitely something you want to build into your product. But building that kind of word of mouth sharing, I would say really focus your surveys on learning and then use what you've learned to try to generate that virality, build that word of mouth. Because the surveys, I've never seen a survey that someone's excited to send to their friends. Doesn't mean it's not out there, but I wouldn't expect that to do that.
Not the survey itself, but like how to improve your product so that they would want to utilize it, not just because they're my friend or my
Gotcha.
that love.
Yeah, well, I think there's a bunch of very good. Thanks for the clarification. There's a bunch of things you can do to build that into your product. So something my team was working on at work was we have a bunch of surveys built into the Capital One app. And so something I before I left for parental leave was working on was, okay, at the end of that survey, depending on what you ranked a certain feature, can we have you sign up for a slot on my calendar? And like, hey, we saw that you didn't like the new feature we just shipped. Would you like to give the product team feedback on it? A lot of startups do that. Or you can, again, send them a gift card or something and get their feedback. But the more you can build it into continuous I've noticed no one's come pick up a book, but please feel free to do so. I have actually multiple copies of some of these. Continuous discovery habits is a great playbook on like how to build this into your product. And that's something Teresa Torres talks about a lot is if you're spending all your time sourcing interviewees, that's a lot of time. So how can you build that in so that the interviewees come new? She's got interviews. No problem. All right. And last question. Anyone who hasn't asked already? All right. Yeah.
So when you were speaking about the interviews that you have
Yeah.
to customers, so my question is how do you identify or you balance the data that comes from the questions being asked to the customers to the actual behavior? See.
That is a great question. And that is that is not $1 million question. That is like $1 billion question. And I would actually say, like, that is why Apple is in all of our pockets, is because they're probably the best in the world at understanding not what the customer is saying. Well, I actually don't think they're that good at anymore, but they built their brand off of being really good at understanding what the customer meant by what they said. It's really hard. I think where possible, you want to observe behavior over just what they're saying. Or that's why like getting someone to pay for something when it is as opposed to just give you a compliment, that's like actually behavior, and that has a lot more power, predictive power. But that's where it's kind of an art and kind of a science. You have to kind of understand and balance the qualitative and the quantitative. I think too often we rely solely on the quantitative and then we miss the qualitative insights. And talking with someone is a great way to read their body language, see what they get excited about. And that is a great way to kind of dig into the questions beneath or the insights beneath what their answers are. And then I'd say when you do, that's a hypothesis that you then want to go test. And that's maybe where you look at, hey, what are they actually doing? What's the behavior? What does the data say? But that's a clue. I think I'm about at time, but I'm going to be hanging out up here. So if you have any other questions, please come and we'll be happy to chat. But hopefully this is helpful and interesting. And I'm assuming we're going to share the slides, but I have links and resources. I've got a gazillion like best practices, also my LinkedIn and email. Last time I did one of these, I had some people reach out and we got coffee. So feel free. I've got a bunch of like checklists, other resources I really like, customer interviewing, or other books I like. So take a look at that and everything's linked. Yeah.
I do want you to take Eric up on his offer to connect. So I've noticed a couple people shot a picture of that. So do that, but even better, come up and meet him. Eric's going to stick around for a few minutes, follow up with him, attempt to use this stuff, reach out to him when you do, and Eric will respond.
I will respond. I'm a bit slow on LinkedIn these days, but I will respond eventually.
Thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure.
For being here. All right.
Of course.